Welcome to all my friends from around the world, and thank you for tuning in to yet another segment of my program, Cause and Effect, with myself, Ashraf Naguib. Today I have this wonderful privilege to spend the evening with not only a dear, dear friend, but a seasoned diplomat and a true humanitarian. My dear friend, His Excellency Sean Regan, the Ambassador of Ireland to Egypt. In the past few years, we've seen a lot of countries that have moved away from the concept of globalization, of free trade, into the realm of protectionism and into the realm of tariffs and barriers. On the contrary, Ireland has moved in the opposite direction, the natural direction, reaching out to its global partners for trade, commerce, industry, services, development, and true international cooperation on many issues, such as climate change, migration, displacement, job creation, and so many other things. It is true that trade between Egypt and Ireland is not really comparable to trade between Egypt and other larger economies. But that does not negate the fact that the team at the Embassy of Ireland in Egypt have been pushing forward a strong agenda for more trade, more investment, and more international development and cooperation. Today, I have this privilege of having a one-to-one informal interview with His Excellency Ambassador Sean O'Regan. Your Excellency, Ambassador Sean O'Regan. Sean, my dear friend, thank you so much for giving me the honor for hosting you on Cause and Effect, this little digitized program that I am filming from home due to the fact that, of course, we cannot meet in conferences as we usually do.
Hello, Ashraf. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you in this new way, and may I congratulate you on your vision for doing your business in a different way as well.
Your Excellency, the first question that comes to my mind is this energetic embassy with energetic leadership, and I'm quite curious to find out and to know exactly what is happening with the embassy in terms of its operation, in terms of dealing with citizens, in terms of dealing with the documentation, the paperwork. You are not a regular office under any circumstances. Things need to be signed and stamped. Obviously, there are also security issues, having people working from home, having accessibility to data. More importantly is how do you manage your staff locally that are not working from the embassy, and how are you connecting and reaching out to your regular channels such as your government and your Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other institutions that by default you have to be in touch with. And more importantly, how is the embassy I was talking at the introduction about the whole concept of investment and trade and knowing how hard you've been pushing this agenda forward. So how are you handling that aspect of things in terms of Irish investors and the intertrade between Egypt and Ireland?
You asked how we're managing our business continuity. Well, I think, to be honest, quite well. We have been working from home now for 4 weeks, and we're only doing face-to-face business with members of the public by appointment, which is not that different to the way we would normally do business. It's just the way we arrange the appointments has had to change. We do have a skeleton staff going into the office once a week, and they are doing all the appointments on the one day. And we continue to deliver the full range of services which we would normally deliver. We're not issuing visas at the moment, and because nobody can travel in any case, and we're not issuing passports at the moment. But we will get back to that fairly soon, I hope. The other things we're doing, we continue to be in contact with our business contacts. Indeed, this week we've been doing some nice work on the trade side, in food and in Irish investments in Egypt. But we're doing it all by phone and by personal email to some extent. We are facing some challenges, of course. Most of our staff do not have access to the embassy email system, and most of our staff do not have access to the server which has all our files on it. But that's, of course, for security reasons. We are able, though, to continue to deliver those services. We meet as an embassy twice a week by video conference, and we are in pretty much daily, even hourly contact, some staff, on various issues. We're also taking the opportunity of this quiet time in terms of interaction with the public to focus a little bit on internal things and internal management, updating files and lists and databases, which it has its own challenges when people are working from home. But we're managing, and I think we're doing pretty well.
This is wonderful news, and I'm glad to see that everything is, at least you've accommodated to the situation, but still functioning and being able to achieve everything that is required of the embassy itself. Now, my second question, Your Excellency, Sean, it's more of a personal question, because I really want to know how you are doing. Not only are you a seasoned diplomat, but as well a gracious host. We have the opportunity, or had the opportunity, to see each other at least once or twice a week in social, public, or private functions. And now that our regular dynamics of our lives has almost come to a halt, how have you been doing? How long have you been staying at home? And what advice could you give people in general, and specifically in working at home? And when we're staying for such long times, how do you get into a routine, and how do you function within that context? Additionally, how's the family, and how are you interacting? And doing this very difficult work-life balance in a situation that I don't think that any of us have been put in before.
Well, thanks for asking, Ashraf. I'm doing well. I have to say I'm quite happy with where I am right now. It's quite a change for us to be working from home, and it does have a lot of challenges. Personally, I haven't left the house for about 10 days now. I've got a big house, I've got a garden, and so I am able to get out and do a bit of exercise. But it's difficult, I know, for many of my colleagues. It's difficult for friends and family who have got slightly different living circumstances. Early on in the crisis, I came across tweets from somebody who used to work used to be a submariner, and he offered some advice which I thought was quite good, and I'll share it here. And I think it's true of whenever there is a difficulty, establish a routine and keep your routine. I, to the extent possible, have been keeping the routine I would have as if I were going into the office. I get up every morning, I dress, I wash, I have breakfast, and I sit down at the computer. I work there until the coffee break. I take a coffee break, work through to lunch, take lunch, work through to a tea break, and then work through to the end of the day. And I try very, very hard to make sure that I finish my day at the normal time that I would finish my day. I think it's also important, even though I live here in Cairo on my own, that you find time for privacy. One of the things I've realized as well is that with all these video conferences we're doing, with this constant need to be in contact with people on the phone and such, is that at the end of the day I really don't want to be on the phone anymore, and I need that little bit of time away from the phone, away from messages, and it's important that you do that. The other thing, of course, is when you do have that routine, you are able to make sure that you eat properly, because there is that terrible tendency when you're working from home to visit the fridge a little bit too much, and I try to avoid that by keeping the cooking routine up. I also make a bit of an effort to exercise every day, and in different ways, I think that's also important, because it keeps the good humour up, and it gets those endorphins going, and they're important. Of course, this is also an opportunity, a real opportunity, to have a little bit of a reflection on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I am taking that opportunity, and it's also an opportunity to have a look at old files, to clean up your email inbox, to clean up your phone contacts, that kind of thing, and because you do have that little bit of extra time. And the other thing that's important, of course, is that you do connect with family, and so you do connect with friends. And part of my daily routine is to call a number of very, very close friends and family, and speak to them and see how they're doing. And because, frankly, we're pretty much all in the same boat. And the other thing that's very important in this period is from my point of view, is to keep a sense of perspective. Yes, this is bad. Yes, this is difficult. But this will end. And once it ends, we'll have a whole new world to look forward to. And perhaps we can talk about that a little bit later.
I'm really glad to see that you have, how can I say, integrated into a Corona era in a sense. And I'm glad that you're staying home and you're staying safe. And we hear a lot of international news, of course, and rightfully so, about China and about the United States of America, and about Spain and about Italy. But there's not that much news, unless you are specifically looking for it, about Ireland. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity if you can give us an insight and give us sort of a brief on how has Corona impacted Ireland, what is happening in Ireland, how is the government dealing with this global crisis on a local level, and how is this impacting the, say, social fabric of the Irish society?
You know, the situation in Ireland, I was in Ireland in late February, early March, and I think at that stage we had our first case, a schoolboy returning from a skiing trip in Italy. The situation has evolved quite rapidly, and I think we had the benefit of having seen what happened in China, having seen what happened in Italy, and so we were able to move in a very fast and determined way to flatten the curve. You know, I think at the forefront of all our minds has to be the human cost of this. And today we had 13 more people die in Ireland, bringing the total number who have died to 235. We have today 6,074 cases. And, you know, in a global context, these numbers are relatively small, but in an Irish context, we're a small country, we're a small population, and it has a very significant impact on us. There are, of course, rituals around funerals that are very, very important for Irish people, and because of the situation we have now, those things are not being done. That in itself causes a lot of anxiety and grief. Connected with that is the whole sense of anxiety that has spread throughout society. We've had a partial shutdown in Ireland. About 3 weeks ago we started that. We went into a total shutdown just 2 weeks ago, now only essential work is allowed to continue. That is also part of the human cost. I see that there are about 850,000 people now in Ireland who are not working, and it's quite conceivable that half of those will not have a job to go back to when this crisis is over. The government is doing all it can to address this. Just today, the funding available to business to ensure that they can continue to employ people, that they can continue to function, was increased to €1 billion. There are already in place employment supports to help companies pay salaries, and those people who have been laid off are getting a reasonable payment weekly. But it doesn't mean that it's easy, and it won't be easy. The total cost to the Irish Exchequer could be some €10 billion, and it will take a long time to recover that. Of course, this comes on the back of a recovery from a recession and that began 12 years ago, and in many ways Ireland is still in recovery from that. While we are reasonably well placed economically, and some commentators would say we can come back very, very strongly once the crisis is over, others, I think quite rightly, are a little bit more cautious. I think we will bounce back, but it will take time. Just this week there was a €6 billion bond issue, which was 5.5 times oversubscribed, and at an exceptionally low interest rate. I think that says something about the international market's view of the strength of the Irish economy. You know, there was nothing wrong with the economy. There's nothing wrong with the Irish economy as this crisis hit us. It's one of those black swan moments which has completely derailed us.
Indeed, it's going to take a very long time for the world to get over this. But that being said, and putting all titles aside, Sean, how do you see a post-Corona world? Do you see that humanity, as usual, has this amazing ability to forget? We've gone through natural disasters where we've seen millions of people displaced, hundreds of thousands dead. We've gone through viruses and pandemics over the past a couple of hundred years that have impacted really what we're talking about, the social fabric of humanity in a sense. What will humanity look like? What will we look like as a globe post-Corona?
I think truth is going to be quite slow. But this is my personal opinion. I think it's going to be difficult. Undoubtedly, our children are going to bear the scars of this for the rest of their lives. Some of us will bear these scars for the rest of our lives. Kids being out of school for 3 months undoubtedly has an impact. Kids being in isolation with their parents undoubtedly has an impact. I think about my own children who have very vivid memories, although they were very young at the time, of 9/11, of the Indian Ocean tsunami, and they still think about it. And I think to some extent it's influenced their career choices. And the whole economic recovery, I think, could well be quite slow. But I wonder as well, if we have a prolonged period in which people are self-isolating or living in isolation, communicating by phone, by video conference, keeping a distance from other people, a physical distance from other people. You know, how does that change their social behavior? How does that change the mindset? How will this develop? Maybe we'll just go back to the way we were. Maybe we will. I don't know. But I think there are certain things that will change. I think people who up until now have perhaps been a bit resistant about online banking or resistant about online retail will suddenly embrace it because they're forced to. Indeed, we see it in the embassy. Some people who were reluctant to take online payments from us before are now quite happy to take them because they need to have money. The other thing I think that this period, I hope, might bring is a greater appreciation of arts and culture. Because, you know, it's there that we turn to in these moments of crisis to get some kind of inspiration and solace and understanding of what's happening. And I think that's only a good thing. And I'm hearing about so many friends who used to play the piano, who used to play the violin, who have, for the first time in 20 years sometimes, started to play again. And that's wonderful. It can only be great. I wonder as well, is it going to make make people have a greater appreciation of the role of science? We've been through a period where the opinions of experts have been derided, where people's opinions and feelings are given the same weight of credibility as hard evidence. And I would really hope that we might see that return to science.
I was asked, how was the world not ready for this? How was all the governments of all these big countries that have all of these big weapons were not ready and prepared for something like what we're going through right now?
Part of that is that this epidemic has been predicted. This particular one, perhaps not. But if you look at the scientific literature going back 20, 30 years, I studied microbiology at university, and I remember we talked then about the possibility of a recurrence of the Spanish flu, the so-called Spanish flu, and the likelihood that this was going to be happening. And perhaps because we thought about it for SARS, it didn't happen. We thought about it for MERS, and it didn't happen. Perhaps that's also contributed to people saying, well, scientists don't really know what they're talking about. But this was predicted. An event like this was predicted. And I would hope that maybe we would get back to an appreciation of science. And one of the things I'm hearing, which is most unscientific, and we've all seen it, the planet is fighting back. No, the planet isn't fighting back. But what is without doubt is that the people are straying into areas where they haven't strayed before. Sometimes they're eating foods that they haven't eaten before. Sometimes they're forced to eat things that they wouldn't normally eat. And when you have that intersection between people and the wild, which hasn't been there before, you do get disease. Ebola came from people eating bushmeat. It seems that this virus came from people eating some kind of food that they got, which would not normally be eaten, although there's no certainty about that, as I understand it. So, you know, when we stray into these areas, there is an impact, there is a pushback. But isn't it remarkable that the way we've dealt with this, to shut down human activity, human production, has had the remarkable effect of clearing NOx from the air over China. And well, that's not going to have any major impact, I don't think, on climate change. I'm sure it's going to have an impact on weather patterns in the coming 6 to 8 months. And that's going to be something to be interested about.
Sean, I'm going to have with me on my little program, Cause and Effect, also an interaction with Laurent Dubeauec from the IOM, of course, It needs no introduction. And we will be discussing the whole concept of this, this human right of the freedom of movement, of which a lot of us pre-corona might have had difficulties in doing. But today, all of us are restricted from even leaving our homes. So how do you see, freedom of movement around the globe change and be reapproached in a sense post-corona?
But I think when we get back from this as well, pretty much everything we've been doing, we're going to have to rethink. As I said, people resistant to banking online or retail online. People are also have been resistant to doing business by video conference. We've always felt that we had to get on a plane and fly somewhere to have a meeting. That may well change. The aviation industry is already, and I think it's just a matter of scale, is going to be devastated. How will it recover? How will governments respond to this? I think there is general expectation that the way in which we've been doing business for the last 30, 40 years is going to change. The whole idea that government should not be involved in business or the private sector, I think has to change. I think large companies probably will get taken over by government, including airlines. And that has its own problems. But I think it may well happen. And we may see a return to a kind of an economic nationalism. We're already seeing it. This virus may well accelerate it. The likelihood of governments seeing that this virus is caused by too much openness, I think, is quite high. Personally, I think that would be a tragedy because quite clearly transparency or lack of transparency was a factor in the spread of this virus. But I think there's also, we run a risk of a return to a kind of a state-led authoritarianism. For the first time in my lifetime, and I think in the history of the Irish state, we have a situation where the police this weekend are having the authority to limit people's freedom of movement. And up until now, this has been an advice from the government. Now it is being enforced. This is quite extraordinary in Ireland, and it's something which is not going to be well received, but it's essential, and most people do understand that it's essential. But you wonder, how far does this go?
How will and how do you foresee governments changing their spending habits? Really directing, we've had this conversation before about climate change and how much we need for climate mitigation and climate action. And we've always argued the fact that, too much money was being spent on too many other things, rather than trying to avert something like the repercussions of climate change.
I would hope that one result of this event is that we have a look at public spending and the way we allocate resources. I would hope that we'll spend more on health and education and research than we do on defence. I would hope that we can perhaps spend a little bit more on the digital highway and a little bit less on the asphalt highway. I would hope as well that we can see that there is a value, as I said before, in the arts and education and culture. One which is often not appreciated in a purely economic sense. So yeah, I mean, I think the recovery is going to be a whole new world for us, a brave new world. Thank you.
Sean, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Ireland to Egypt, I want to thank you very, very much for accepting to be with me on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening and finally getting to see you and looking forward to seeing you very soon in person. Please do take care, stay home and stay safe. And please give the regards of all Egyptians to our friends in Ireland. May we all be safe.
Thank you, Ashraf. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in with me on this wonderful and very special interview with His Excellency Ambassador Sean Regan, the Ambassador of Ireland to Egypt. This has been a wonderful interaction. We hope everyone around the world will be safe. Please stay home, stay safe, and stay tuned.